thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing, yeah.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Think and Grow podcast with your hosts, Dr. Z
and Professor P. Today, we have an awesome guest, Brent Halfwassen. Did I say your name correctly?
Halfwassen. We
Halfwassen.
made it all American now. As we ditched the Dutch and the German. It's just Halfwassen.
Okay.
He's not German. I think you used the German pronunciation there.
Halfwassen.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So Brent is predominantly a business coach, and I actually met you through BizStarts. That's one of our local organizations that works with small businesses, entrepreneurs for development and growth, so their business can thrive. But I'll just give a little bit of your background because you have a really rich history. So you're a small business coach, and your logo, it looks like transforming small business owners' hard work into hard cash. You like that?
Nice.
You also have a podcast, the Entrepreneurs Encounters podcast, and you're an adjunct business instructor at WCTC. You're still doing that?
That's right, yes.
Awesome. So he says you started a lawn care business at the age of 10, and then you co-founded a retail business in 1992. You worked in corporate finance for GE Healthcare, and you helped launch a church in downtown Milwaukee. That's really exciting. Love to hear more about that. You're also general manager of a nonprofit home improvement store. And most recently, it says you're working as a management and real estate consultant to repurpose a 2,000-acre former World War II ordnance plant. So, and you're a pilot.
Quite the mentor. So for our purposes, we have all these different segments, right, guys and gals? So we've got mega mentors is what we'd like to have Brent focus on with all of his skills. Super busy guy. Take it away, Brent.
Yeah, well, thanks for that intro. It sounds like I've got a lot of pieces there. When I first got into supporting small businesses, I actually applied to be a mentor at BizStarts before I became their primary coach there. And the point was, when I started that small business, the lawn care wasn't quite as difficult. I had some challenges. You had to figure out how to do it. You had to figure out how to start to bid properly on bigger projects and collect the bills and those type of things. However, my brother and I started that retail business in 92 that you referenced. And I wished that I had a mentor board of advisors, which would be volunteer, other business professionals, other people in various industries who can help me grow. And I wished I had a coach to help me out, because as you know, if you're in entrepreneurship, it feels super lonely. Your 9-to-5 job folks don't understand exactly what you're going through, but they're working to relate. It's not because they're terrible people. It's because they're not entrepreneurs. It is a different way to live life. It's a different stress level. It's a different thinking process. So having other people, it's why I started Entrepreneur Encounters. We have to meet other entrepreneurs who are further along on the journey than we are, to learn from them, grow with them, help experience some of the things that they're going through, ideally avoid some items that they go through. But there are secrets to the path along the way that we cannot learn if we try and go it alone.
Yeah, you're asking for a lot of trouble if you try to do everything by yourself. We were just on another call with another guest, and him and I were both talking about how important it is to get in that pipeline of people, get surrounded by the people that can really help you become so much more than what you currently are.
And avoid a lot of pitfalls along the way.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes you just need support through the pitfalls, right?
Yeah,
the challenge is that, everyone's business is a little bit unique. Just because someone ended up being successful launching their catering business doesn't mean just because you know them, you're going to be successful in your catering business. However, the experiences we go through aren't unique. And one of the sort of mental, emotional fallacies we get stuck in is a term I call chronic uniqueness. I'm the only one experiencing this. I'm the only business owner going through this right now. Yeah. I'm the only entrepreneur in history who's had this experience. Well, not true. You are unique. Your business is unique. but your experiences are actually shared in common. And when we start to dive into those and we take away like the hyper like detailed nuances and you get back to the general core, it's like, well, does this relate? Oh, whew, man, I can't believe you said that. How did you know? I hear that a lot. How did you know that? I'm like, well, I've coached over 600 different aspiring and in-business entrepreneurs, and you start to see the themes, and they're themes I experienced when I started my businesses. Even this coaching business, you feel, oh, a coach ought to be able to start a coaching business, no problem. You go through some of those same valleys, the same pits.
Right.
You need the same support in order to make it successful.
Now, how did you, so you started at 10, I guess, just to make some extra cash, or do you come from a background like your parents or other family members that were entrepreneurs? Because then you started the retail business after that.
So my family, probably since the age of about 6, my parents were in business for themselves. My dad was a farm manager and farm real estate broker. And so that involved, making sure the crops are done on a regular basis, that pays the bills. And then when you help someone either buy or sell a piece of property, that's the larger, chunk that doesn't come consistently. And so there were a lot of conversations at the table. When it came to mowing the lawns, one could say, yeah, it's some extra money, but it's funny. I believe entrepreneurs' minds are wired a little bit differently. And it's not necessarily how you're born, it's how you choose to view the world. And the thing is, there were neighbors who had really long lawns, and your options to make money when you're 10 was I could do that. I could mow lawns when it was sunny and nice and beautiful outside, or I could. Anyone remember? Newspapers used to be delivered to people's houses. This may shock your listeners.
I was a paper boy.
Right? There used to actually be such a thing called paper newspapers. Everyone in your neighborhood got one, and so you'd have to wake up at 5 a.m. The main truck would drop off the giant pile. You'd stuff all the ads and things in there and roll them up, put the rubber band on it, put it on the bag, go on your bike. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not a morning person. So I'm not waking up at 5 in the morning. So what else can I do? And I can mow lawns. And, got the lawnmower. And then it became, well, how much the commons area in the middle of the subdivision, how much you paying those people to mow? Because, I can certainly do better than that. And frankly, as someone who was a consumer of that mowed field, i.e. that's where we played football and, baseball and all the stuff, all the neighborhood kids get together. I'm like, I'll make sure it's mowed before we have our game, so, so that sort of developed, but ultimately it was about finding a problem. The game store was a similar issue. The only place in town, I grew up in Champaign-Urbana, the only place in town that's really sold role-playing games and strategic board games was a comic book shop. It was a comic book shop with a section for games. There were no true game stores. And so we opened just a game store. Now, ultimately, there ended up being, I think, 2 more that opened up in town. And that just shows you there's not necessarily it's not a limit to what's out there. If you're helping to create the niche and create the opportunity, all of a sudden it can actually grow and accelerate. So they're not necessarily competition. There were just more people now promoting it and making it more mainstream. And instead of drawing, and this was by and large, well, it was totally pre-online, but not necessarily, mail order and stuff, but it was a different environment there. And so that, again, what's the problem? There's only a comic book shop, which sort of looked down on you and literally is sort of like, oh, you want the games? Like, go around the corner and like, don't talk to me. You're getting in the way of my Superman versus Batman discussion. Okay, fine. But let's have a place where people who love that type of thing are welcome, encouraged, we're getting the things you need, et cetera. So it's all about problem solving.
Right.
Nice. Yeah. Well, it sounds like that should have been a very lucrative business. Or once you got some other competition, then did you kind of get pushed out?
Business opportunity is always it's always different, and this is the challenge for everyone. Just because there's some people who want to buy it, then you have the issue of, but then I got to pay rent and then I got to employ. I mean, I was in high school. So both my brother and I were in high school. So we're bringing on other employees. So you've got the same problems everyone else has. You have employee problems. Am I stocking the right inventory? How do I keep theft down? How do I make sure that when people buy, they're buying from me? All those typical challenges that go on there. And then with limited capital, we didn't have unlimited capital. We ran that store with a maximum budget of like $20,000. And I think we opened it with like 10 or 12 we put in, and that included all the fixtures, all the inventory, so we were going to like stores that were going out of business. There was a neighborhood department store that was going bankrupt. We bought some fixtures from them.
Mm-hmm.
We went to, I don't even know if it was Home Depot back then. We went to the lumber store back then, and we bought some shelving to be able to put on the walls. We found some mirrors somewhere else that we can mount, right? It's the way a lot of people start their business. You figure out how to scrape it all together in order to make it happen, in order to scale it. So, lucrative that's a nebulous term in terms of what you want to get to. Okay. If I could go back and do it now, would it be very different? And yes. But again, we were 15 and 17. We were starting out. We had the advice from our parents who had been in business, but they were in farm management and farm real estate. There's lots of things that do translate from an entrepreneurial standpoint.
Yeah.
Retail isn't necessarily one of them. Okay. So you're learning on the fly, right? And so they're sort of like, well, next year when I do that, here's the things I'll do better. And that's what I want people to know. Those are the things that hopefully you learn from. You figure out, you go and ask, hey, I am thinking about doing a tournament, right? We're going to do it. So we were doing games or board games. You could do a tournament with board games. So instead of just doing it the first time, then be like, oop, that didn't work. Wish I would have done X, Y, and Z. Why not go ask some other people somewhere and say, hey, have you ever considered a tournament before? What are some of the things you learned? All of a sudden, you can now implement those and do them better. For instance, I should have stocked more of the games that we had in stock at the time that you were playing them, because that's when people are like, oh, that's pretty cool. Do you have one? Well, someone just bought the last one. Those become missed sales opportunities, right? Yeah. You don't know that until you experience it. But you don't have to always learn it the hard way. That's where I love your thing about the mentorship. You can learn it through experience. And it doesn't have to be someone in your category. Other game stores, are they going to want to share all their secrets? Nope. Right. But how about other retailers? What have other retailers experienced? Has anyone else done live demos essentially of the product, or ways that you bring people in? It could be book clubs. It could be, right? Bookstores would do that. Bring people in. Well, what do you need to do? I need to make sure to stock more of the book, because if I'm doing the public reading and the author's coming in and doing the reading of this children's book, most of the parents who are there might buy one. So I better have at least a copy for everyone, as an example. So there's ways, even across, it works.
Yeah.
With all that said, what are some of the early struggles that you can remember that you can share with the listeners? Because we always like to hit on the fact that we want everybody to know that, look, other people are doing it. If you're sitting there and going, I'm not sure, I don't know, and you got all these questions and fears of unknowns in your head, right? So what are some of the early on struggles that you could share with the listeners so that they can go, wow, okay, well, you did that and you did that to solve that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That'll really help them, I think.
The biggest struggle all small business owners faced, and we were no different, and it was actually the same with the lawn mowing business, is making sure that you understand how your money flows and that you have enough money. Having enough money is the big challenge.
Yeah.
Right. If I go back to mowing lawns, it was all good until it needed a maintenance hit. And if you didn't save up enough to have
cash flow, right,
change out the brake pads or, do something that needed to happen, then it's like, bummer. Store would be the same thing. You're doing inventory management. How many employees do you bring on? When do you bring them on? How much do you work? How much do they work? What do you need to sell every day in order to make it work? Those are probably some of the big ones. Everyone has different cash flow challenges, but if you're not mapping out what's my goal, how much do I need to make, and then what are all my costs, and get a really intimate understanding of that, you really, really put yourself in a hole. And I'll give this analogy that goes out there. A lot of people don't like numbers, and they say, well, I'm not really a numbers person and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, look, these aren't hard numbers. We're not doing long division with them. The computer will do all the hard work for you. But as an example, if I ask you, I would say, we're in Milwaukee, right? How are the Milwaukee Bucks doing? How did they do last night? No one would say they went out and worked really hard. You might say they worked really hard, but that's not the answer to the question. The answer is they won. And I would say, how do you know? Well, the score was X. And I say, you don't like numbers. You're not allowed to refer to the score. How do you know they won? Well, I know Giannis made 20 shots. 20 is a number. You can't refer to that number. How do you know how well they did? And pretty soon you're like, I don't have a clue. I know by looking at the stat sheet and at the scoreboard, ultimately, how the team went. Is it important that they went out and tried hard? Yes, because they would have been slaughtered out there if they didn't. Right? But most people run their business and say, if I go out there and I work hard and just do a good job, I'm going to be fine. And I'm like, those are important elements, but they're not sufficient. you have to track, you have to know.
Right.
Someone, you do the chart, you figure out, hey, someone's got to figure out how to shut that person off from shooting 3-pointers. How do you know? Because I know they've hit 6 of them. We follow numbers all the time and all sorts of stuff. And then somehow when we start our business, we're like, I'm not a numbers person. I always hated math and school. You don't need to know any of that. There's probably only 3 or 4 that you really need to track.
Yeah.
Those you have to do well at. And one of the things I work at as a coach, where I say transforming hard work into hard cash, because most people don't feel the translation of the two. And so I want you to work hard on the things that matter so that you hit the goals you want to achieve. And that's how I try and help businesses align. In every business I've been in, it's been the same struggle. Nonprofit or for-profit, doesn't matter. They always seem to manifest the same way.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that your nonprofit and then the church. So is that kind of how you got maybe some real estate? I guess real estate kind of comes into play there with that.
Yeah, real estate is a little bit about that. Well, as you remember, my parents were in real estate, so they're in farm real estate. Both of them had their broker's license. The piece that I wanted when I was finished up my term with GE, I decided that wasn't the next direction I wanted to go. Then I thought, what do I want to do? And at the time, I thought, this would have been 2007, that I really wanted to get into helping people buy and sell businesses because I felt like I had a good handle on business knowledge. And at the time, and it still is, Wisconsin's the license that covers helping people buy and sell businesses. And one of them is a real estate license. It's actually covered under the real estate license. So I'm like, great, I'll go ahead and pick that up. Then ultimately in 2010, I got involved with this project. So a lot of people don't know, but even before World War II came out, the U.S. was out gathering 6,000 and 10,000 acres at a time, which is like 10 to 16 square miles of land. And they would parcel it together, and then they had like 40 of these sites around the country, and that's where they would build ordnance. And ordnance are the big shells that'll go in the battleships and things like that.
Okay.
So all the way down to like ammunition, but mainly it was the bigger shots for guns, because they knew they needed to start manufacturing this because they knew the war was coming to the U.S. one way or another. So the one that I was working on actually started in 1940. For those who don't know, the U.S. didn't officially enter the war till 1941, but the Defense Department was already working ahead on that one. So when war ends, all of a sudden you're like, well, what am I going to do with all these giant sites? Defense Department doesn't need them. They go surplus. And long story short, it's a lot of the already zoned industrial land in America. So I was working on a particular one to help bring railroad service back into the park. It involved getting some tax increment financing opportunities in conjunction with a great partnership we had with the county, the county that we were in, and then ultimately figured out how to redesign that and connect with partnerships through other landowners in the park to build a corridor where it can become a benefit to the entirety of, at the time, what remained about 2,000 acres to be able to develop. And so that was a long process, because you've got to get the county on board. You've got to get the Army on board. You got to get the Army Corps of Engineers on board. You got to get the state on board. There's a lot of actors that all have to be, the railroads have to be on board. There's a lot of people that have to come together at the same time. And that's where I got a deeper understanding of one of my other gifts, which is I see a path forward through an opportunity where others just say, no, you can't do it that way. This can't be done. There's a lot of no's and closed doors. And I say, this may be a path no one's taken before, and it may not seem straightforward. But if your goal is to achieve this, then let's take whatever path it takes legally, but let's take whatever path it takes in order to get there to achieve it. And that's a gift. Another gift I believe I've been given is to be able to see that path forward. And so when I can combine that with, when you speak operations, I see numbers and I know how they translate together, combined with, I can see a path forward in your business where maybe you're seeing closed doors. I think that really brings a lot of the power that I've brought to all the businesses I've met. And that's the common theme, because as you read my resume, you're like, this guy's been everywhere. Like, right. But those are the key pieces that I think are core that has made me successful in all the paths I've gone down.
What was the partnership that brought all that together, and who was like the mastermind behind even identifying this location and then what it was going to turn into, or what the idea, that the vision that they had for it.
Well, the funny part for the location was actually my dad was the real estate broker for it originally. He was working with a company finding a buyer. They'd had it listed for a long time. And here's the truth generally about real estate. No one wanted to buy a 6,000 acre parcel that had some farmland, some industrial land, a horse farm, a sewer and water plant. It had a Superfund site on it. It just had sort of a hodgepodge, and they wanted to find one buyer. And one of the ways, again, figuring out a way forward. And so I tip my hat to my parents for their amazing creativity. They figured out how to find 22 separate buyers for a lot of the different parcels.
Wow.
So that they could finance the ultimate purchase. And so you won't find one buyer for it, but if you start carving the pieces up, hey, you know, the state Fish and Wildlife Department is looking to acquire some additional land and they have funds for it. So let's sell the forest to them. There's someone else already in the waste management business that actually can utilize some of the excess capacity from the sewer and water plant to be able to further their business. Let's sell the sewer and water plant to them, right? So, and farmers are going to buy some farmland, so let's take some of the better pieces and parcel those out. So again, it's another example of, you have a problem, which is, here's a giant chunk of land that no one wants to buy, and you start creating alternative solutions that someone's like, well, I never really thought of it that way. Well, once you start to peel back those layers and you open up the, like, just because you haven't thought of it doesn't mean that it's not doable. It just means that we haven't considered it before. Now opportunity opens up. And to me, that is the gift of where entrepreneurs can really come in and thrive, is that, well, no one's really done it that way before. And I said, exactly. That's why it's such an amazing opportunity. And our mentors are helpful, because someone could tell you no one's ever done it before because, and maybe you look at that because, and you're like, oh yeah, you're right. That's not a good idea. But sometimes other people scratch their head with you and you're like, you're right. You're onto something. You have an opportunity here to change the way the game's done and to carve out an amazing business for yourself where others didn't see the path forward.
Yeah. So you've just mentioned, which I hit on this early on, innovation, creativity in real estate is big, because if you can think outside the box and think of solutions, it's a lot of problem solving, right? So with that said, what have you seen in your experience with helping other business owners? And do you feel like that's a common theme for all businesses, that they need to tap into that creativity, that ability to be innovative to really grow their business?
So first, I would say I want all business owners to operate within their purpose. There's a lot of discussion about passion. Here's the challenge with passion, and any married couple knows this. Frankly, anyone in a relationship knows this. Passion ebbs and flows. So when the passion is out, it was like, well, what am I relying on? So if people are working on their purpose, that thing they feel like God put them on this earth to do, and what they were created for. And some of that is, again, it's not necessarily genetic. All your life's experiences coming together. What are those themes? What are those pieces? What is all coming together? First, operate out of that strength. That's number one that I say. When I look at creativity, it's funny. There's always a discussion about, like, who's a creative, quote unquote creative, and who's not a creative. My feelings are always hurt, because as soon as I mentioned numbers, I was like, oh, you're not a creative. I was like, it shows what you know about numbers. However, the where it is a different way of looking at the world. And I think most people on the outside would say, that was amazingly creative. How did you come up with that idea? For you, you've learned, as an entrepreneur and small business owner, you've learned to look at the world in a way that there are a set of problems to be solved. And you're the type of person who says, I wonder why someone didn't just do X.
Yeah.
Right. If you're the type of person who walks down the street and says, I wonder why they don't just do blank. It's because to you are seeing new and different ways. Everyone else, it's because this is the way it's always been done. You know, so there was a story, I was trying to shorten it, but some woman's cooking with her daughter, and the daughter wants to know, why do we cook the roast this way? We always cut the end of the roast off and put it away. Right? You probably heard this story. And they're like, I don't know. Let's go call grandma. Right? And they call grandma and say, Grandma, why do we always used to cut the roast off the end? And she said, because my pan wasn't big enough.
Yeah.
Right. And everyone else keeps doing it the way it always has been done, but without the context of their pan is now huge. But it was just, we always cut it off without any thought about why. What if we just, right? So I would almost encourage people to ask that question. When
Mhm.
someone says, this is the way we do it, ask why.
Mhm.
There may be a good reason, but there may not be a good reason. If there's not a good reason, then you got to ask, do I need to keep doing it, or is there a better way to do it? If business
Yeah.
owners are doing that,
Mhm.
that those are essential pieces. Yes, you still need to have a good handle on your numbers. Yes, you still need to tell your story. By the way, telling your story is marketing.
Mhm.
Encouraging people to buy into your story. That's the selling
Yeah.
process.
Mhm.
But you're going to have to do those pieces as well. But I think if that understanding of like how to do something a little bit differently and that questioning nature isn't there, it becomes really, really difficult to succeed because you're always in a position of just being the status quo. And that's a hard
Yeah.
spot to be. It's a hard spot for any business to be, but you end up not being able to adjust and react quickly when life doesn't look like you planned it to be, which is almost always in small business. Life doesn't look like you drew it up.
Yeah, that's one thing that I really have. It's opened my eyes to being on this journey, from coming from a 9 to 5 job or a corporate job where the path, I guess, is kind of laid out in front of you and you basically toe the line, and get it right, through school, whoever makes the best grades, that's the person that's praised. But in entrepreneurship, it's like it's a dance, and getting comfortable with that dance, that things aren't necessarily going to turn out the way that you wanted or you thought or you hoped that they would.
Yeah, I think if you're not a good problem solver, I mean, it's much bigger than that. But entrepreneurship is a lot of solving stuff, and if you feel like you're terrible at it, you may not want to jump into that pool.
Well, and I think it's being open-minded. So it is definitely problem solving. Here's the truth for a lot of smaller businesses. And by smaller, by the way, just to define it, we're talking less than 10 employees.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you're the only person working there at the business. And in my
Mhm.
experience, a lot of people are amazing at their skill, craft, or trade.
Mhm.
But again, just working harder at it.
Right.
I don't know the final score of the Bucks game yet by just working harder. You got to do
Mhm.
all the other pieces
Yeah.
in order to make it work. So you got to take that amazing skill, craft, or trade, and then you have to blend in some portion of some of that other business acumen, and that involves the ability to shift. It doesn't always mean you have to abandon what you're doing. If you're an artist and you're doing a lot of drawings, maybe your original thing was, I'm going to do landscape drawings of scenery around Milwaukee.
Mhm.
Well, that particular item may not be the thing that everyone wants, but it doesn't mean that you can't draw. It
Mhm.
means you may have to reposition that maybe to something else that someone else wants. And so sometimes we get stuck with like, no one likes my drawings. Like, no one wants the landscape drawings.
Right.
Well, what if you captured like action shots of, in your way of like people gathering? Maybe that's what they want. Maybe they want intimate, close pictures. Like, I'm not sure. And it doesn't mean you have to give up on your thing, but you do have
Right.
to iterate. So you definitely have to be willing to iterate if you're going to succeed. There is
Yeah.
no business I
For
can
that
think of.
example there, what do people want? And that's that's the thing about being an entrepreneur. It's a lot of that problem solving. Okay, I'm a really great sketch artist, but they're not buying that. Well, they don't want it. So then the next question is, but you learn from that cause and effect. Okay, well, what do they want? What are people buying currently?
Yeah.
And you just learn as you go.
That's right. And it is that, and that's one of the things to remember. So I'm really glad you said that. If you listen to the story of so many successful entrepreneurs, ones that we would consider successful, by the way, success is defined. I let people define success any way you want. If it's number of households that you serve and impact, great. If it's the number of homes that you have one of your sketches hanging in, and that's what you want to measure it, great. If it's dollars, great. If it's number of employees you can support and to support families, you get to define success.
Right.
But if you track successful entrepreneurs, they are clearly not staying stagnant. They're clearly always sort of innovating, changing, finding out where does my customer go. And their first launch tends to be, I was sure this is what everyone was going to buy. And I launched it, and guess how many people came? 0, right? Crickets. I threw a concert, no one showed up. Like all those people have that story, and therefore they have to innovate and say, it doesn't mean the idea was bad. Maybe the execution was bad. Maybe you didn't market it well. Maybe I can't remember. I had one that I didn't know the date was coinciding with some other large thing that was going on. And I just essentially picked really terrible competition. Like I might have been competing against like a playoff game or something. Like no one's coming down because everyone's watching the playoff game, right? Like that stuff happens, and it doesn't mean that we were wrong, but you learn from it. So next time I'm going to check all the calendars, not just my own calendar. I'm going to make sure I'm not, up against some other thing that has got a bigger draw, or I could have put it at a different time, or like so much that we learn. But just remember, a lot of their stories are like, wow, I launched it. I put a lot of time and effort into it, and it fell with a thud. And that doesn't mean that we quit, but we got to keep going.
Well, what about the church that you helped in downtown Milwaukee? Because, like you said, nonprofits also have similar issues too about location and drawing not customers to a church, but membership.
Yeah. So you're right. And in the nonprofit world, a lot of times people don't like customers, particularly in church. They don't like the phrase customers. And there's a different way. And it's because it has a monetary association with it. If you go back there, if you remember how I said you can define success, then what is your success? If it's in a church, are you looking at conversions, professions of faith? Are you going to measure acts of service out in your community? Are you going to measure number of peoples and seats? Like these are all things that can be measured. Ultimately what got us in there, both my wife and I, when we were both working at GE at the time, we felt a strong call in our lives by God to take a year off and go do a year of ministry work.
Oh, nice.
We looked in a lot of places. GE is an amazing spot to do that. They offered us a 1-year leave of absence to be able to accomplish that work. And ultimately, we got connected with a pastor that we had already previously known. But he said, hey, your skills and talents are going to be amazing for what we do, because we have a pastoral staff that knows how to minister and knows how to preach. But there's an administrative side to the church. Church is heavy on volunteers. A lot of nonprofits are heavy on volunteers. Volunteer management is not a skill that you wake up one day and just do a great job at, because everyone thinks the volunteers work for nothing. That is not true. Volunteers work for no monetary pay, but they clearly work for something. And so the key is you got to figure out what they're in for. When I worked at Community Warehouse, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but it was where I had even more volunteer management experience. You're paying in stories of inspiration. At a church, some of the inspiration is community. The inspiration is outreach to neighbors. The inspiration is letting other people learn about Jesus and the impact that he's had in our lives and the impact he's made for the world, for everyone, in the remission of sin. And so what is the outcome? And you have to make sure that you are anchoring what you do in that. If it becomes, my goal is I need you to deliver this box over there by Sunday at 10 a.m. so we can do our thing, that very quickly leads to burnout. And so understanding, and again, these are problems to be solved. So the way my mind works was, at first, so one of the challenges we had, it was a mobile church. So the church was meeting inside MATC's auditorium originally, Milwaukee Area Technical College's auditorium. Fine, no problem. However, you can't store all your stuff there.
Right.
So the speakers, the drum set, they had some lights, but if we wanted some special lighting, children's ministry setup, the Bibles, you name it, all that had to be brought in the morning and brought out after we're done.
Wow.
That was a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of people volunteering their SUVs, and very quickly people were getting, and it wasn't well organized in the beginning, because in the beginning you're all excited and get all this stuff and go big. And so a couple of lessons I would have is, one, do a minimum viable product. It's a concept that a lot of people have heard about. The minimum viable product is what is the least you need to do in order to achieve your goal. Rather than having the vision of like, well, this is what this stationary church has. Yeah, but they don't have to transport it all. We were literally burning out volunteers because people were like, they would arrive at 6 a.m. for a 10 a.m. service.
Wow.
And you're driving back and forth like 4 times to keep hauling stuff that wasn't well binned. So we containerized everything a little bit better. We slimmed down what was really needed to bring. Ultimately, we got a donation of a older single, box van, and we basically said, if it doesn't fit in the van, it can't go to the church. So at the end of the day, it was someone would wake up. There were sets of keys that went around. Someone would wake up, get in the van, drive the van to church. Then the team would unpack it. When you're done, you load it all up, go park it in his parking spot, leave it there till next week.
Oh, nice.
But that started with like literally 10 volunteers with SUVs or large vehicles starting at 6 a.m, not sustainable, right? So by fixing the process, we're able to move forward. So in a nonprofit, what I look at is you're still measuring something. You should still be measuring something to know if you're effective, because you want your results to be impactful. If you say, I want to be impactful with the kingdom of God, that's awesome. Where is God calling you to be impactful? And then go measure and make sure that's working, because you're going to have staff, you have volunteers, you have people, you have report outs that you're going to have, you have supporters, you have donors. All those stakeholders matter, and they're going to want to measure something. It may not be your financial statement, but it's going to be an impact statement. And so what are you impacting? How do you measure it? How do you do it? So in that way, it becomes the same. And as much as someone's like, we don't have customers, I'm like, no, but you have people who are impacted and want to see impact, and that's what they're watching. And you've got to figure out how to cater to that. Yeah.
One thing you touched on was in your whole telling that story there, which really jumped up to me right away, was efficiency, right? As a solopreneur running a real estate flip business, I'm one person. Talk about, efficiency, how important that is in a business.
Oh, I cannot overemphasize how important efficiency is. I acknowledge on my personality profile tests or strength finders or something, efficiency is going to pop up high. It drives me absolutely batty when I don't see efficiency. Classic example is in staffing. When I was running the retail store, how many people did I actually need in there to run the cash register and or run the demo day or whatever? Yeah. Staffing is classic. All of us have gone into a place and you look around and you're like, whoa, they got a lot of people here today.
Yeah.
Not a lot of customers, a lot of employees, right? That's one. When I watch people go through a process of making something, creating something, when it takes a long time, I'm one of those people who wants to jump on the backside of the counter and be like, hey, don't worry, I'll make it because I can do it 3 times faster because it's bugging the snot out of me that it's going slow, right? Those efficiencies, they end up starting to impact how many customers you can serve, the customer satisfaction. We're a culture that sort of claim like, I want what I want when I want, lots of it.
Yeah.
Right. Is that a good culture, bad culture? I'm not going to weigh in on that. That's the culture I'm working in right now. Yeah. So efficiency is so important because we're always have limited resources. I have limited money. The one thing we are the most limited of is time, right? And I have limited other resources that I can rely upon, usually particularly other human resources. So if I can be efficient with what I have, then we can figure out how to reach those goals that we set for ourselves for success, either faster or with the limited resources we have, or being able to scale it up. Another classic example is I worked with one entrepreneur and they were running a particular machine like a person. And by that, I mean, they were running it 40 hours a week. The machine didn't care. It didn't need a break. It could run, there were 168 total hours in a week. It should have been running probably 160 of those. There's probably some downtime for PM or put some more preventative maintenance or put some more whatever in it to make it work. But the machine could have run all the time. So their measuring efficiency is really important. And I would challenge everyone, look at whatever you do in your operation and what's efficient. For individuals, they're 2 things. They're both cousins that steal people's efficiency, i.e. steal their time. And it's basically email and social media.
Yeah.
You could add, if you're on like news websites and stuff like that, that's a cousin of social media. Those pieces eat your time, which is eating your efficiency. And time is the one thing in business you can never get back. And as a solopreneur working by yourself, man, that is so precious. When it's gone, it's gone. And I want you to at least own it and know and willfully say, I'm going to spend an hour on this. And it's because I choose to. I'm rejuvenating myself. I need to do it for my business. I don't care. But don't let that hour turn into 4 hours without you making a conscious choice. Yeah. Because when we don't make a choice, life makes choices for us.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, what are some of the trends, I guess, that you're seeing, like in terms of the businesses that people are choosing or the interest? Are you seeing any trends or?
I admit that I'm actually a little bit too close to the trees on that one, because I have my client set that I work with and I think about the items they do. What I'll tell you is that I think basically the trends revolve around this. People discover that they are really gifted at what they do, and they want to figure out how to turn that into a business. I think that is probably the primary way that solopreneurs and small businesses that have 10 or less employees get started. They decide that they are great at baking cupcakes and they want to figure out how to do a bakery. They are great at cooking and they want to figure out how to do catering or open up a restaurant. They are great at photography and they want to figure out how to turn that into a broader business. They are great at understanding how to code websites and they think they ought to do website development. That to me is ultimately the trend, and why I go back to what's your purpose and what does your experience all point to figure out what is it that you want to move forward on? Because that tends to be the mantra. The challenge is, because you can bake 12 cupcakes and they're the most amazing and all your neighbors will agree in your home kitchen, doesn't mean that you can bake 1,000 cupcakes every day when your baker calls in at 4 o'clock and says, I'm not coming today to cook.
Yeah.
That's 4 a.m., by the way, because bakers start early.
Right.
That is a different process around business. And that's a spot where I help as a coach, and we're having a band of mentors around you. People have crossed that path before. People say, hey, think about these things first. And maybe you could be efficient and figure out how to scale out of a space that works, that's smaller, before you have to go to the big space, as an example. So you can tie all these concepts we've been talking about in this podcast together, make it successful. But that's to me the trend I see. You're amazing at your skill, craft, or trade, and you're ready to take that step out because either people weren't leveraging you appropriately when you were working for someone else, or this has really always been your purpose and you were doing essentially another job to, quote, pay the bills. And you just decided, look, this is how God created me to be. I'm going to get out there and figure out how to monetize it and make money for myself and live the life that I enjoy and I want to live. Because that is the promise for entrepreneurs and small business owners, is that you get some of that control back. It is not easy. We don't all get to sit back on the beach drinking martinis. That's not the truth. But it can be a life that I enjoy and want to live, even if it doesn't have the same monetary rewards. It comes with other intrinsic rewards that cannot be replaced working for other people.
Okay, with that said, then what are some of the startup steps that you feel are most important for people that are, that cupcake makers sitting there thinking, I got to do this for myself? You brought up a good point. I say this to a lot of people all the time. If you've got some kind of idea or something you want to do and it's your passion, which is great, figure out how to monetize it.
Yeah. So figure out, for number one, go talk to someone else who has started a business. It doesn't have to be a coach. There are actually a lot of services around Milwaukee that are, particularly if you're just starting out. Dr. Z mentioned BizStarts was one. That's where I first started working on coaching. Small Business Development Center is another. And just ask, what are some things that I need to think about? Because remember, you are great at baking. You can go through the baking aisle and know exactly which ingredients are going to be the best for your product. You need to find the person who does that for businesses, because you don't know what type of ovens you need or when you need to get the ovens or can you rent it or all those other pieces.
Right.
So go ask people what you need. I've encountered too many entrepreneurs that discovered the hard way, which usually means either the expensive way or a lot of lost time, and almost always both, what they needed. So first, ask what you need. Next, you have to put together a budget, and you have to budget two different things. And everyone says budget and they start running for the hills. But again, we already talked about numbers and why numbers are important. You got to budget your money. You got to understand how much, because ultimately I want you to charge the amount you need to charge. Most people undercharge for their time and their products when they first get started. And that is a tragedy. So if that cupcake should be sold for $4, don't you dare go out there and sell it for $2 and say, well, I'm just trying to go and get some initial customers. No, you're devaluing what you offer because you're amazing and you're worth it. But you got to set a budget so that you know at the end of the day, if my goal is I want to be able to grow to get a full-scale bakery, and because I've done my homework talking to people, I know all the equipment costs this and here's what, all these pieces, you can hit your goal. That's the first thing to budget, is your money. And tie it back to what you need to go do then. I need to sell 1,000 cupcakes a day in order to hit my number. Then you don't have to think about the number anymore. You just go out and sell 1,000 cupcakes. The dollars kind of get washed out of the equation. The other piece you have to budget is your time.
Mm-hmm.
I know so many people who don't spend the time in the right places that they end up not being successful for themselves. So you need two sets of budgets, one for your time, one for your money. If you have talked to someone about what you need to have, and then you set those two budgets, those become benchmarks and goals. They don't control your life. They're not a like ironclad legal principle that you have to follow. But in the process, you think so hard about what you need to do that then the warning bells go off when all of a sudden you're like, in my time budget, I was only supposed to spend one day in the kitchen. And I find myself there on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah.
Maybe my budget was wrong, and that's okay. But maybe my process was wrong, and I can change it. That's where the efficiency thing starts showing up. So all these pieces tie together. Those I think are the bare necessities. If you're willing to start with those, I'll tell you the one that's not on my list. And a lot of people will disagree with me, but I welcome the discussion. A business plan is not on my list. Oh, everyone hear me. Milwaukee Small Business Coach says you do not need a business plan to start your business. That is a great lie, and I'm tired of people saying it. Now, I say that as someone, one of the things I taught as the adjunct teacher at Waukesha Technical College, they asked me to teach the business plan course. And I was like, you don't know the irony of you asking me to do this and how I'm going to transform it. Because the business plan is needed by someone who's going to fund you. Your lender wants to see it. And usually that's about it. And the problem is with the business plans is that we spend more time thinking about writing them. Like it becomes an English literature exercise.
Yeah.
What it's supposed to be is to help me organize my thoughts. To say, oh, have you thought about how you're going to handle personnel staffing? Have you thought about if you're a bakery, where you're going to buy your bakery goods from? Because you're not buying them at the grocery store anymore. You should be getting them from a wholesale distributor. Have you thought about? That's what the business plan's purpose is supposed to be. But we get distracted and we start worried about, we start just throwing all sorts of nonsense in there. What I want you to do instead is tell a compelling story. Tell the story of what you're going to do, how you're going to achieve it, and how you're going to be successful. When you tell that compelling story, if you listen to people who are going for venture capital money and these pitches, I'm not talking about Shark Tank. Find some good podcasts like The Pitch or something that actually does real investors talking to real entrepreneurs. The stories are clean and concise and compelling, and they're not 27 pages long, and they're not written down.
Right.
Then you can get into the details. But man, when you have all those pieces down, you are so inspirational and people get it and you understand it well. So tell a good story. And I'm not talking about fabricating and convincing people to do stuff that's dumb.
Yeah.
But when you tell that story, that's what's needed. And the pieces will show up eventually. I'm like, turns out I don't really know anything about marketing. Good. Go and do that. But don't just make garbage up to throw into a business plan because I'm not going to read it.
Yeah, you were talking about the story, which makes me think about selling. So can you talk about selling? Because a lot of people, that's a 4-letter word.
Oh, yeah.
So I learned this the hard way for myself too. And almost all business owners do. And there are books out there that say this. If you are in business, if you are a small business owner, you are in sales. That is just the truth. And here's the deal. So a lot of people don't like selling because they've made selling to be something that it really isn't. They're thinking about like, oh, I'm going to be like the used car salesman on the lot and like chasing people down and hounding them to buy stuff they don't want to buy. Well, look, number one, don't chase the people who don't want to buy your product. I only want you to chase the people who do buy your product. But number two, almost everyone, when I have coached them, when I listen to their story, they start out with the ones who start out with, oh, I don't like selling. It's, it's cheap, capitalism is the oppression of, okay, blah, 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 blah. Fine. But you're out there still trying to get some money. But when I ask them about their story, when they're into their purpose zone and talking about the things they do, you start asking, well, why? What's the good outcome for people? Why do they care? Why do they want that? If you dig down on the why far enough, on that sketch that we talked about, that sketch artist that was having trouble doing the landscapes, what do people want? What do they want to get when they see this? Do they want to be inspired? Do they want to feel great? The deal is people buy on emotion. Usually when we're doing these things, when I do cupcakes, what do I want for the cupcakes? I want that anniversary party to be so memorable that everyone anchors and remembers that 20th anniversary party was so amazing. Was it only because of the cupcakes? No, but the cupcakes added such joy and class and great experience for everyone there. That's what you're selling. You're selling the great experience and the joy and the happiness. It just happens to be wrapped up with flour and sugar and chocolate and eggs, right? And so when we sell, there's always something in what we're doing. And if you're selling to the emotion, figure out when you describe how do people feel when they consume your product or service, that's what you're selling.
Yeah.
And almost always no one has problems saying, when you describe your product, when I take a bite of this thing, what am I supposed to experience? Boy, you write those words down.
Yeah.
And then you say, that's what you go out and do. You don't go out and ask someone if they want to buy a cupcake.
Yeah.
Like, would you like to taste some joy today?
Right.
Dude, I'd love to have some joy. Then you need to take a bite of my cupcake.
I'm craving a cupcake right now.
ultimately, we get stuck on the what and the how. Like, I'm going to say, when I bring my car in to be serviced, what do I want done? And if the mechanic's like, oh, I know what you want done. You want me to loosen the bolt over there, and then you want me to drain out the fluid. No, I don't. I want my car to run right so it doesn't break. I want it to stop making a noise.
Right.
I want to be sure it'll make it through winter and I won't like have a breakdown somewhere. That's actually what I'm buying. How you achieve that goal, sometimes I don't even care. I mean, I care a little bit if the bill seems too high and they tell me they replace the whole car, but I don't need the breakdown. And that's the difference. And so what they're selling is reliability and functionality and sometimes lack of annoyance. Yeah. How they do it and what they do is radically different from that. They have highly trained mechanics. They have people who know what they're doing. They have supply chain. Most people, when they sell initially, they want to go into the whole thing. I got 5 people lined up and I'm going to give you all these parts. And I even know the part numbers off the top of my head. And I don't care about any of that. Stop my brakes from squealing. Actually, I don't even know it's my brakes. Stop my car from making this horrible noise every time I stop, right? True. So if we get out of the mode of talking about how and what, and we get more in the mode of thinking about the emotions that people experience and the outcomes and benefits that you'll get on the back end, man, the selling already comes out of people. We just got to position it first. The last piece I want to say on the selling is somehow in America, and maybe worldwide, but I know America best, we are trained to like make this whole argument. And then in the end, we say, therefore, X, Y, Z, right? Like get your punchline at the very end. Well, the problem is when the punchline's at the very end, I already stopped listening to you a long time ago. Yeah. Take that punchline, put that thing right up at the beginning. Give me the therefore right off the bat, because then I'll be like, that's it. That's what I'm looking for. People spend money to solve a problem. That's why we're talking about entrepreneurs see the world in terms of problems. Why doesn't someone just do X, Y, and Z? I'm tired of this happening. Good. That's a problem. And if 25 other people experience that, maybe you have a business that you can do around that. If you lead with either, that's why I lead with, I want to transform your hard work into hard cash. A question I ask when I start a lot of conferences, hey, small business owners, how many people feel like you're working your butts off and don't have very much to show for it?
Yeah.
Right? Guess how many hands I get? At least 80% of the room.
Yeah.
That's why I want to turn your hard work into hard cash, because that's what we're here to do. I want some money in my pocket to reward my hard work. That's not the only thing I'm doing this for, but I'm not going to do it for nothing forever. Yeah. So that's why I lead that way. I don't talk to you about, we're going to do a deep dive into your marketing and understand your numbers and take apart your financials and fix your bookkeeping. Like that's all the how and the what that I do. Yeah. No one cares. When I promote based on that, no one wants to buy. Yeah. But will you buy in terms of like, I think what you do is amazing and I think we can translate it not from just hard work and no pay, but we can put some hard cash in your pocket. People are like, heck yeah, let's talk some more.
Yeah, that's I can solve your problem.
Yeah. That's selling.
Well, cool. Wow, we could go on all day. Unfortunately, we don't have all day. So what is the one thing as we wind down here that you want to leave the listeners with, especially for those that are, in that just getting started? If they were just to remember one thing, about all the stuff we talked about today, what would that one thing be?
Find someone else to connect to and help share about your business and seek advice. We cannot do it alone. It could be a podcast. That's why I do the Entrepreneur Encounters podcast. It could be a coach. That's why I became a Milwaukee small business coach. It could be your neighbor. It could be, but find someone who's actually in business. It doesn't even have to be the same industry. You find one person, at least. You just ask for one. So start with one. Yeah. If I told you to find 10, you'd be overwhelmed. You wouldn't find any. So just start with one and get connected. That you can ask questions. You can share. At a minimum, you can empathize with each other. Man, I had a tough day today. I thought about hiring an employee, and I looked at these resumes and the people who came in and what they were asking me to get paid. And I know I'm not even making any money, and then they want to be paid more than I can even make in a day. Like all that, like suddenly you can have someone you connect to. Then you're not alone. You're not chronically unique anymore. If you start there, that begins your journey of being willing to go outside yourself, because no business has ever grown and been built alone. Even if it always stayed a solopreneurship, it didn't actually grow alone. Start building.
Okay, so find someone. That said, what's the best way for everybody out there to find you?
Thanks for asking. One of the best ways, go on my website, mkebusinesscoach.com, mkebusinesscoach.com. You can connect with me on the forum. There's a link there. You can schedule a free consultation with me. We'll spend 25 minutes together, understand you, how I might be able to serve you. And honestly, as you can tell in this phone call, I can't help but flip into coaching mode. So you're going to come away with some action items to help your business, whether you hire me or not.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brent. I really appreciated all of the gems that you dropped for us. And this podcast will definitely help people to listen to it, especially entrepreneurs and business owners who are facing their own sets of challenges. I think you've provided a lot of ideas that to move forward with that. So thank you so much. And I always appreciate hearing from you. And you just have so much wisdom. Experience.
Well, I'm honored by your comments. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on as a guest of your show.
All right, we're going to leave it there, everybody. And as always, thank you in advance.
Just thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. Just thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. Yeah, we're thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. We're thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. We're thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. We're thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah.